GarageBand for iOS is amazing and powerful and still somehow completely free. And it's had no shortage of love from Apple lately, with thousands of new loops, instruments and drum kits added in the last few months. That Alpha Waves pack in particular was fantastic. So we really don't have anything to moan about, right? I really shouldn't moan. I'm gonna moan. This is a rant. Buckle up. Cast your mind back to earlier on in the year to just before Apple's annual WWDC conference. The latest iPad Pros had just been outfitted with the amazingly powerful M1 chip, which must have meant that Apple were about to release a Pro-level iOS DAW with all of the features that GarageBand currently lacks. Right? Nope. Nout. Zilch. Nada. Look, Apple are still obviously really committed to further developing and releasing content for GarageBand on iOS. It's certainly not abandonware by any stretch of the imagination. That being said, there are some core features missing that, one, hold it back from being properly usable as a pro digital audio workstation, and two, drive iOS music makers looking for more editing options to other, more robust iOS DAWs, like Cubasis 3, for example. So I asked you, yes, you, member of the GarageBand community, what features should be added to GarageBand for iOS? And wow, did you have something to say? Stick around to later on in the video where I'll share some of those too. First though, these are, in my opinion, 3 features that need to be added to GarageBand for iOS pronto. GarageBand on iOS automatically applies normalization to your project when you export it, whether you want it to or not. In a nutshell, normalization is the application of a constant amount of gain to an audio recording to bring the amplitude to a target level, which on paper sounds great, until you realise that GarageBand doesn't let you manually set that target level. It works out that target level automatically based on the average level of your overall project, which often results in the overall dynamics of your project being negatively affected, shall we say. This also causes problems if you plan to master your exported track for release in an iOS-based mastering app like Clevgren's Grand Finale or Positive Grid's Final Touch. In GarageBand for Mac, you can toggle off auto-normalization by simply unchecking a box, and I really don't see how difficult it could possibly be to add a similar control into GarageBand for iOS. This one is number 1 on my list because I think it would be such an easy fix, yet would make GarageBand users' lives so much easier. In Logic and GarageBand on Mac, you can automate volume, panning, echo, reverb, EQ, the individual parameters of any smart controls you have loaded on a track, and specific parameters of any third-party plugins you have loaded on a track as well. In GarageBand for iOS, you can automate volume, and that's it. It's honestly mind-blowing that Apple haven't added the ability to automate anything apart from volume at this point. Now, I understand that providing users with the same level of control over their iOS AUV3 plugins as desktop users have over their AU plugins might be a bit of a tall order and possibly not doable at all. But allowing us to automate something as simple as panning, or even the controls of the effects that come with GarageBand for iOS, Surely that isn't too much to ask, right? Finally, a fully fledged master track in GarageBand for iOS would be incredible. Again, if we look at GarageBand for Mac's master track, it acts almost like an output bus, allowing you to add effects, automation, and EQ to the entire project. This would be amazing if added and would allow users to add those finishing touches that you currently need a third-party app to achieve. Out of the 3 features I've talked about in this video so far, I think the master track is probably the least likely, if I'm honest. But hoo boy, the addition of a master track would take GarageBand for iOS to a whole new level. As I mentioned earlier, I asked various GarageBand communities around the internet which features they thought should be added to GarageBand for iOS. Here are some of the highlights. Over on Twitter, Chop Sauce says, AU3 so I can load it into BeatMaker and use the GarageBand instruments with the BeatMaker sequencer. That would be a great idea. I know a lot of AUM users would love this as well. As it stands at the moment, GarageBand can only be used as a host. You can't record its instruments into other digital audio workstations, which kinda sucks, but is very Apple. Also on Twitter, Nicolosi says, audio unit parameter automation. Yes, absolutely, more automation in general would be fantastic, as I mentioned earlier, but specifically audio unit parameter automation would be really, really powerful. Over on r/GarageBand on Reddit, Numians suggests upgrade to the sampler. Allow use of samples without changing speed when using different notes. Yes, GarageBand for iOS's sampler is pretty basic, and adding this functionality would definitely be a great idea. Jonathan the guy says, trumpet. And you know what, I kind of agree. The strings are one of the very best touch instruments in GarageBand for iOS. Adding some brass or even some woodwind instruments would be fantastic as well. And Ravenora 2 says, just fix the bloody sustain. Maybe different time signatures also, but seriously, the sustain. Yeah, I totally get you. If you are brave enough to update to iOS 15, there is an update to GarageBand iOS that goes along with that. One of the patch notes for that update does mention that they have done some work with the sustain in the Alchemy synth, I believe. So look into that if you plan on updating to iOS 15. You might just be pleasantly surprised. And there was a great response on Facebook as well, as you can imagine. Ross Clark says, stop auto-saving each time I close the file. Absolutely, Ross, I completely agree. It is the most irritating thing in the world that every time you close the file, it automatically saves. A manual save button, I think, or a manual save toggle would be really, really useful. Jim Johnson says, create left-handed instruments and drums for lefty musicians. This is so obvious, and I can't believe that this hasn't been implemented already. A really, really good idea. If anybody from Apple is watching this, do this pronto. It's a great idea. John Clark suggests a separate undo/redo for individual tracks rather than having to go back through everything to fix an unnoticed mistake. Yes, that would really be very helpful. I have been there, believe me, there is nothing worse, and having separate undo-redo controls for individual tracks I think would be very, very useful as well. And GarageBand Guru and Australia's Sexiest Man 2007 nominee suggests 1, a master track, and 2, ability to turn off auto-normalization. Great minds think alike, Pete. And I think actually there were a lot of people who suggested these things, which kind of tells me that these are probably among the most wanted features that could possibly be added to GarageBand for iOS. Finally, Andrew Reeves commented, I have a simple request still, to be able to view the title of the project in the project. Sue me. I don't think I need to sue you, Andrew. This seems like really, really obvious stuff that isn't in the app that really should be in the app. If this was the only thing that Apple added to GarageBand iOS in the near future, I think I'd still be pretty happy, because there is nothing worse than having to exit out of your project and have it automatically save even when you don't want it to, just to find out or remember what the name of it was. Great stuff. If you really want to see some of these ideas added to GarageBand in future, take a second and fill out Apple's official GarageBand feedback form. Yeah, it really does exist. I'll stick a link to it down in the description. And if you want to check out some of the things that Apple have added to GarageBand for iOS, then click, tap, or tickle